One of the greatest matchups in recent memory is about to take place, July 29th, 2023. Earl Spence Jr. and Terrence Bud Crawford are going to face one another for the undisputed welterweight title. Let's talk about what this truly means in the sport of boxing today. The upcoming battle for undisputed supremacy at welterweight between Earl Spence Jr. and Terrence Bud Crawford is one of the most highly anticipated matchups in recent memory. This particular fight today is the biggest fight in boxing. It isn't just because these two men happen to be champions and hold between them all four belts for the welterweight division, but it happens to be a battle for a historical place in the welterweight division. In the four-belt era, never has there been an undisputed champion at welterweight. But for another reason, these two men are the cream of the division, and their recent press conference, which took place in LA and New York on back-to-back dates, typifies class in boxing. Though these men be accomplished, but they represent themselves and their families very well. They are upstanding individuals, and that's what makes them class of the division in boxing. They can set a new precedent because we have seen former faces of boxing ill represent, though their popularity and their accomplishments may have married. Some of them have not always been the best as far as what happens outside of the ring. The Floyd Mayweather era lasted well beyond his retired days. In fact, Mayweather is still participating in what we call exhibition matches, but he has long since hung up his titles. And he represents one who is the greatest earner of all time in the sport of boxing. But the focus on boxing should never be the earnings. It should be the competition, the competitive nature of the participants, and the class of individuals that they cross over the duration of their careers. That makes all the difference in the world. As we look through the history books, we can see other times when the class of divisions stepped forward in boxing, just like when James Toney and Roy Jones Jr. faced off in November of '94. These two men were pound for pound the best around the middleweight division. The super middleweight division, and they were both 25, 26 years old when they faced off, November 1994. It was the type of competition that boxing yearned for. People couldn't wait to see these two men in the ring against one another, and they were both well accomplished at that time. They fought frequently, they fought the best, and when they came together, though their fight didn't end with an historic ending, it was kind of lackluster because Roy Jones was able to outbox James Toney so well. James Toney didn't come into the fight in his best shape. In fact, on fight night, he had ballooned up 18 pounds. But that wasn't Roy Jones's fault. It was all on James, who wanted a rematch and chased a rematch to the rest of their careers, to the end of the rest of their careers. And therefore, Roy had one up on James, and he's proud to speak on that and display that. Every opportunity that you have to keep your opponent submerged beneath your legacy is what it's about. Then we can look at the last unification between undefeated welterweights. And that was from September of 1999, when Oscar De La Hoya, the Golden Boy, took on Felix Tito Trinidad in a matchup that had been long awaited between two fighters who were very accomplished at their classes and who had contrasting styles. But not only the contrasting styles, they also brought something to the ring that was always a part of boxing, that rivalry between Mexican and Puerto Rico. These two men brought it, and they put on an exhibition of boxing where De La Hoya, for a change in the sport of boxing, used lateral movement, in and out, fast hand speed, and ring intelligence to Tito's stalking, ever persistent, pursuing a knockout. The contrast led the fight to be very close, but in the final rounds, the championship rounds, when De La Hoya elected to stop engaging and just incorporating movement, it swayed the judges enough that Tito ended up with a decision. They should have rematched, but it was not to be. But again, one of the highlights of boxing during that era. These two men were 26 years old as well. That's what you like to see, the competitive spirit and nature of the fighters. Speaking succinctly of competition, competitiveness, this fight is being looked at like one of old. The classic fight that took place between Sugar Ray Leonard and Thomas Hearns. This fight is one in the history books as one of the greatest welterweight matchups of all time and one of the greatest fights of all time. It took place in September of 1981, excuse me. And these two men were, again, at that time, the cream of their divisions. What we saw on the night that these two champions came into the ring to defend their titles was something classic and epic. Contrasting styles. Ray Leonard, the fluid boxer puncher who could turn slugger if necessary, and Thomas Hitman Hearns, who was the ultimate outboxer, but with a deadly right hand that was known to put opponents to sleep. He was 32-0 when he faced Ray Leonard, and Ray Leonard was 30-1. His single loss to Roberto Duran in another classic matchup. When these two men came together, it gave such a shot in the arm for the sport of boxing It was reminiscent of Ali and Frazier coming together, and they'll ever be intertwined through history for having faced each other in the ring. So as we look ahead to Terrence Bud Crawford and Earl Spence Jr. coming together for their undisputed title, the stakes are equally as high. The reward is every bit gratifying to see these two young men come together for the sport of boxing. It will, I believe, ignite and incite others with the ideology that in order to leave a lasting impression on the sport, I must be impressive in putting myself in a position for people to have something to remember. And that is more important than the bag. Yes, the bag is important, to get paid and compensated for what you do, because you put your life on the line every single time you step into that ring. But when you're in there against the best, it's like watching the Super Bowl or the NBA Finals or the World Series. It's when your name is forever etched in lights and all eyes of the world that follow your sport are on you, and they'll ever remember you for your accomplishments and what you did in those moments. So, what does it mean for these two men to come together? It means everything. And to set that type of precedent for the sport of boxing and influence others throughout the other weight classes to do the same, I take my hat off to these two men. So salute to Bud Crawford and Earl Spence Jr. And may they have a great fight. This is Stormy B Man. Shout out to the mighty LDBC and Liberated Perspective, a third eye view of the world. For more content such as this, please like, comment, subscribe, and share. Let me know what your thoughts are. Peace to everyone out there, and everyone please remain safe.